Do you have a website, an external presence, employees, an office? Any of these things can be compromised and attacked. How are you defending these assets? Have you penetration tested these public assets? Start 2017 by taking a proactive approach to securing your vulnerable areas. Black Hills Information Security has been helping companies find their weaknesses since 2008. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com and see how they can help you sleep better at night. Welcome back, everyone, to Startup Security Weekly. Michael St. Arcangelo is here in studio. I want to mention our fine friends, of course, at itpro.tv, itpro.tv/startup security. Use the discount code SS30. Try it free for 7 days. Get 30% off your monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription. Go do it.
Yeah, I love that. We're gonna start taking a bigger look at that too, you and me, and looking at some of the content and sharing that, because the thing, and we've talked about this now a couple times this week, but if this is the first time that you're watching us talk about this, what I've really enjoyed about learning about IT Pro TV is their approach is, we're going to bring you stuff that's relevant. We're going to keep looking at whether it's good or not. And by the way, we can update it. If something needs to get updated and you're in the studio Monday, it's up by, if not Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. So it's timely. But they've started some new series now where they look at the concepts behind red teaming or the concepts behind blue teaming. And I'm completely convinced that if you're in security today and you're not constantly exposing yourself to all these different things that are happening and at least able to be conversant on it,
yeah,
you're going to miss out. And this is a great way to do it.
What I like is it's access to this quick on-demand library of stuff that can get you up to speed on the topic at varying levels, right?
Yep.
Whether that's a technical thing, like, oh, I need to be up to speed on this tool, on this concept, on this particular thing because a project just came my way, or I want to start researching this new thing, I'm going to go take some training on it. And it also helps you in your career in that, you know, in my job, I just had my review, and I really need to get better at project management, at infrastructure design, whatever, even higher level. I mean, infrastructure design is probably a little technical, but project management, right? I can go get up to speed on that on IT Pro TV.
You know what else
That's
is
what
good
I like
too,
about
and
it.
this just occurred to me. You know, a lot of times, and even on this show, we do this. We'll say red teaming, or we'll say blue teaming. Now we say purple teaming. We'll bring something up, and most people go, "Oh yeah, yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, I love that." And you don't necessarily know what it is. This is the kind of resource where you get to go and
we call that the business laugh.
Check. Yeah, I like that. I'm gonna pull that.
There was a lot of business laughing going on until one day I was like, "Wait a minute, you don't know what I'm talking about." And they're like, "Yeah, no, we just laugh."
Yeah, it sounds good, and we're all along.
I'm like, "You need to go to IT Pro TV." And
well,
go,
but that's the nice part about it, though, is that what you pointed out that resonated with me is you can get to the level that you need to.
Yeah.
So you hear a term and you're like, yeah, I don't know if I know what that term is. Well, you can ask us, and I'm not embarrassed if I get asked, and I'm not embarrassed to ask.
If I don't know,
here's a way to go figure it out. So I like it, and I think you're going to keep seeing more from it. So it's good. I really like it a lot. So let's talk some articles and discussion, and I think what we're taking a look at is how to better explain our focus. And just in the break there, I wrote down that what we're going to look at is how we improve the security of business by exploring the business of security. So, you know, and I feel like I've been saying this a lot, so we'll try to write it up better. But, you know, a lot of the stories that I pick for this segment when we talk about them, I'm looking at people that are running their own companies, whether it's a lifestyle business or a startup or whatever. But what I've done, because I get the opportunity, I'm working with enterprise teams, I'm working with vendors, I'm working with startups. I get the chance to work with executives and boards. And so when you kind of sit in the middle of it, you say, we all think it's different, and it's not that different. So these are concepts that any of us can apply. But I threw this one in because a lot of you have asked these types of questions. 3 reasons why a side hustle can make a huge impact in your career.
And what's like a side hustle? Is that like...
I was going to ask if you've got a side hustle.
Is that like I got a lemonade stand I do on the weekends?
That's exactly the concept. There's a lot of people now that what they find is they've got their day job. And look, I appreciate in security sometimes your day job is also your night and your weekend job. That's part of this industry.
Well, you may have a side hustle inside of your career. Yeah.
And that's exactly what it is. And so and I can tell you, I'm a big fan of, if you think you want to be a freelancer or you think you want to build your own company, you want to do a startup, start it as a side hustle. And so the idea is and if you take it literally, it's the hustle. It's that you're learning that grind. You know, Paul and I have talked a lot about just sell something for $1,000, but sell it enough. Get a repeat order.
And that doesn't, in the beginning, it doesn't even need to really be a business. You could say, look, doing this job now, my focus is X. I want to go research why, like in my own time.
And that's exactly
and it can all be under that umbrella of security. Like maybe I'm an incident responder, but I want to go learn about application development and security. So that's my side hustle, my career.
And there's number one. Yeah. So the idea to it is you can learn new skills. Now I'm going to add to it too. If you take something, so I like the idea of getting paid for it, even if you're going to learn a new skill, because that's going to do two things. It's going to give you a little extra income, and that makes it easier to justify or prioritize, or it lets you get a nice vacation, a dinner out, something to that effect. But here's the other part, especially if we've been in security. You look at it and you say, marketing, I understand that. Well, you've got a career in marketing, Paul. Is it as easy as everybody made it out to be?
No, and what I was talking with someone yesterday, and I won't steal anyone's thunder, but I'll talk about it after it occurs. But I was interviewed and talking about that, and I was like, yeah, I pretty much. I wish I could say that I planned it this way, but I spent a good year doing a specific role in marketing, and it turns out that really helped me in my business today. So, and while I figured out that wasn't where I wanted my career to go, I enjoyed doing it. I learned a lot, but I realized I wanted to do something different. What I didn't realize until fairly recently is how crucial that was to my career and my business today, and I'm very thankful to.
So we're going to circle back and we're going to put a finer point on that. The idea then of the side hustle, the benefits, they talk about you get some of that income, you get to learn some of those new skills. The other one I want to add to it is sales. We all think sales is either a bunch of vultures or it must be easy or it's whatever. Yeah, well, when you've got an idea and you're really excited about it and you get a chance to connect with somebody else and you've got to convince them to make an investment of time, of energy, of money, I tell you what, and I think this matters from a security perspective so much, you'll have a different understanding of the vendors that you are working with. You'll be able to sort through the vendors that you want to work with faster. And when you need to sell your ideas internally, you're going to be a lot better off for it. Third option I have in this one is you get freedom. They say it's your own boss. I got to tell you, you might find, by the way, that you don't like it. A lot of people I've met thought it was going to be awesome. They get into it. It's not for them. If you get into that situation, I don't think that's a problem. That's in fact, I try to be more empathetic about it, Paul, but actually we don't. Here's the thing. We've talked about this, and so I threw it in because this has been a thread that we've talked about for a while. So do you need empathy? Do you not need empathy? Do you need more empathy? Do leaders need empathy? And empathy is that ability to, it's an emotional, it's part of emotional intelligence. It's our ability to understand somebody else's perspective. I think in security, it's absolutely important. I think that the way that we go about things, if you want to be successful, you need that opportunity to be able to understand it from their perspective, and that's empathy. But it gets written about so much when it comes to communication and so much when it comes to leadership that people kind of take it the wrong way. So Daniel Goleman, who is a leading thinker on this, I mean, this is his thing, and he looks at it and he basically says, yeah, everybody keeps saying we need more empathy, but there are limits to it. There's only so much you can do in terms of altruism. There's only so much you can do in terms of understanding. And so his point is, yeah, you don't really need to do that. You need the right levels of empathy. You need the right levels of compassion. And so they've really gotten more into the neuroscience of it all. It's an interesting read if you kind of geek out on this stuff the more the way that I do. Here's the point. And I'm going to point this out too because I've got to crack this nut myself. It talks about more need for meditation, right? Which for me is going to come down to awareness of yourself, awareness of your emotions. See, Paul's already on it. I love this. So
sorry, I was meditating.
It's perfect. And look at you.
I just said mediating, which was kind of interesting.
You feel so
mediating your way to compassionate action. I guess you could do that too.
You could do that. You could. Here's why I think again this type of stuff matters from a security perspective. It's easy to get swept up. You read these things and you like it one way or the other way, and you decide based on what works for you. What I'd say is the answer lies somewhere in the middle, and it probably depends on how much empathy and compassion you currently have. But just keep in mind with this, when you're in security today, you're going to somebody else, you're asking them to change, to do something that's probably complex that they don't understand as well as they'd like to. I think that a little bit of empathy is, for us, probably going to go a long way. All right, this other one. Just want to point this out. You are not the user of the false consensus effect. I'll tell you what, this works if you're anybody listening to this. We have this tendency where we say, well, I mean, I know how this is going to work. I mean, because, I designed it for somebody just like me. The short answer is no. Nope. You need to understand the backgrounds, the approaches. They talk here a lot about mental models. I talk about systems that people use in order to get to a particular outcome. And a lot of times we'll design something because it works for us, and we don't really have an understanding of how it works for everybody else. But we buy into it, and we go, well, but I talked to Paul. He said it worked for him. Well, we're close enough that, that kind of makes sense.
I go back to the example that Awake Security gave us. They're like, yeah, we sat down.
I love his approach. Gary's approach on that was fantastic.
Sat down with incident responders for like a week or so at a time. It was just like, hey, like, how do you do your job and where are your frustration points?
Yeah.
I think that was probably one of this year the better examples of really truly understanding the problem from multiple other people's perspectives, which is what I think you're saying.
Yeah, and you know what? We're going to have to go check in with Awake, too. And if you go back and look at that, and I don't have the number in front of me, but if you go back and look at that episode, it was fantastic. And his approach was, we went out and we talked to people, and we just said, hey, tell us 3 ways you describe your job. And they were kind of shocked by what they learned. But if you then go back and use that from a marketing perspective, you have such a different understanding. I mean, I really dig that. Now, one of the other things we learned from Gary on that show is that there's an average of 37 panes or panels or screens you got to take a look at.
Great segue.
Complete overwhelmed, right? Too many choices. But, Paul, I mean, you and I were even talking about that this morning as we were looking at ways to help this network connect the industry and the community together, that if there's too many choices, people are completely overwhelmed by it.
Yeah, so we had a whiteboard, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not presenting all those choices to everyone who I think we can help. That's like way too much. Like we're gonna cherry pick things, maybe ease our way into it and say, look, this is what we recommend, and then maybe later say, well, we've got these other pieces, but you do get very overwhelmed by options.
Yeah. So I like this because I again tend to see this. So it's there's a broader concept called the paradox of choice, and we would tend to think that if we have more options, that we're happier. That more options is better. And what tends to happen is more options means that we delay our decisions, we make a decision, and then as soon as we make it, we almost have buyer's remorse, like, ooh, I don't know if I made the right choice. I don't know if I did the right thing. And so what happens then a lot of times, too, if you're looking at security or you're trying to if you give you too many choices, then it's well, what do you do? So it's overwhelming for us if we're trying to present it. It's overwhelming if you're trying to understand it or work with it or any of those types of things. So they had 4 predictors then that'll tell you if somebody's going to be overloaded. And I liked these. So I'll just give you the high level. You come to the show notes and check it out. Choice set complexity. So how did you operationalize what my choices were? I used to use Apple as a great example of doing this right, and I have not actively looked at their stuff, but I'll tell you, it feels a little bit more overwhelming. But if you go back to the iPods, classic, so pre-iPhone, pre-everything else, they had the iPod. They started with just the iPod, all right, and then they called that the Classic for a while, but that was their deluxe one. Then on the low end, they had the Shuffle, and in the middle, they had the Nano. Which do you think most people chose?
The Nano?
Yep. Because the price point, it had enough of the features. It didn't have all the super fancy stuff at the time, but it also wasn't the Shuffle. And if you went to their website, that's pretty much where they drove you. So they gave you the way that they presented it. You can have this super premium option. It was $500. You can have this not as premium option, but it's still pretty cool, and it's a little smaller, and it's got colorful cases, and that's $200 or whatever. Or you can have this $99 one, and really it's just kind of a throwaway. But if you want to get into it, you can have it. I mean, it's good because we made it, but really you probably don't want that. But what was cool was when you went into it, though, what they were really good at, guess which one they made the best profit margin on?
The Nano.
So they really figured that out. So if you wanted to be that person who was that early adopter or you had access to everything, you were good. You were covered. So that's called choice set complexity. Did I give
How
you?
do we apply this to the question that we probably get every day from our wives, Michael, and that's, what do you want to do for dinner? Talk about being overwhelmed with choices.
I think you just go steak.
Yeah.
What do you want? Steak.
Steak.
But we had that yesterday. Okay, well let's go different tonight. How about steak?
Yeah.
Right, and then they'll stop asking. The task difficulty. So there's a lot of theory around this, but if the choices seem so different or they're really complex. So again, what Apple did right was, here, you want something really basic? This. If you want pretty much everything here, and if you really want to be super special, you can have this one. You're going to pay for it, but there you go. If I can't discern quickly, which sometimes I feel like for example, do you want the iPhone 10? Do you want the iPhone 8? Do you still want to pick up they still sell the 6S's or the SEs? Okay, I can't even tell you anymore what the difference is between those phones. I can tell you,
I could, but it's content for another show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. All right.
A show that we don't have on our network.
And then the decision goal, and that's the tough part for a lot of people. And we ask this question all the time: what's the problem you're trying to solve? I find a lot of people go into making choices, and Paul, they have no idea. They don't know the problem they're trying to solve, which means if you don't know the problem you're trying to solve, or the outcome you want. But that's also why when we take a look at the stuff that we're trying to do here, and we then talk about outcomes, it's shocking to me the number of people who don't know. Like, they don't know the problem they're trying to solve, which means they don't know the outcome. But then they're looking at all these different choices. There's no connection to any of it.
Well, I think a lot of people want to be cool, so they're going to buy the most expensive thing from Apple.
I think sometimes
That's the
we
case.
do that.
Not all the time.
Last one, pretty quick. 3 myths about successful founders that won't die. It's negative, but I kind of like it because founders are bold risk takers. I agree. I mean, I think some are. And I think what happens is the people that are the bold risk takers, we write stories about. So we go, oh, that must be the way to do it. No. If this is something you're interested in, you don't have to do it. Lone Rangers, I actually think teams do really well. And I think we see that pretty consistently. And then the powerful personalities part. I don't know. Neither of us has a powerful personality, Paul, so I don't even know how to address this.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
All right. The startup news, notes of interest. I just continued what happens when you sell your startup. Here's why I put this in. It's actually pretty good writing if you get a chance, and it goes deep into it. 2 parts I wanted to point out. One is more of my own editorial on it. I talk to a lot of people who start a company, and I say to them, hey, what's your exit? What's your plan? And a lot of them say, well, I don't have one. I'm not going to. You need to. You need it. You may never – look, you might have a lifestyle business. It's going to be great to the day that you're done, that you retire or whatever. It might be a family-run business. But you have to give some thought about it. And what I also find interesting is chances are you're not going to IPO. Chances are you're going to either get acquired or you're going to sell or you're going to merge or something to that effect. And it's at least worth thinking about in the beginning, what's my exit? Because what I also find sometimes is you'll say to somebody, well, would you ever consider? And I'm always amazed at people who, no, I'd never even consider it. And I remember, right, because I feel like a complete show if we talk about Shark Tank. I remember one time sitting down and watching the show with my kids when they were a little bit younger, and I don't remember who it was. Mark Cuban made somebody an offer, and the person was like, but he wanted 50%, and the guy's like, oh, it's too much equity. And it was kind of like you're going to go from like a $10 million company to a $100 million company. Do you want to have 100% of $10 million? Or do you want to have 50% of $100 million? And I don't think people think about that cleanly. And so so what's important to you in the business, and how do you want to think about it? That matters. But there's this other thing that I thought was pretty interesting, too.
Well, I think to the Shark Tank point, you need to and I don't think many people do this, because I've seen the sharks actually say, let me just buy the company right now. Right. And there's like, oh, my God, I wasn't totally – do you walk in with – be prepared for that. Yeah. And a lot of times that's going to work out for you. Like, yeah. And I watched someone do that, and as he thought about it and hemmed and hawed, the price started dropping. Yep. And then he was like, oh, okay, well, I just, I could have got $200,000 more, but I didn't because I wasn't decisive.
I watched one of the shows that we talked about. I can't remember where the investor said, how about I just buy the company from you guys? Like, that would be awesome. Like, here you go, done. Thank you.
Done.
Like, that's my exit. Like, I had this idea. I brought it to market. I'm really excited about it. There we go. Here's the second part about this, though. So if you go read this article, and I highly recommend it, it talks about preferred stock and preferred shares versus non-preferred shares. And it talked about, and I thought this was really interesting. So if you ever hear somebody talking about double dipping, what happens is, let's say, and this is, I'm going to loosely quote their example. You've got a 20% stake and you've got a preferred share. So what happens on that liquidation event, whatever that exit is, you get your, assuming there's enough, you get your money back plus 20% of, at 20%. Residual. And then you also get 20% of whatever's left. Mm-hmm. So if you've just got common stock, what ends up happening is, let's say after all the money's left, there's $10 million left over. You get 20%. Here's your $2 million. Thanks for playing, or however that worked out. And what happens is, if you've got this preferred stock, it's you get your money back plus a share, and then you get your share of whatever's left over. So the preferred stock's really good. And so if you ever get to the investing side, you want to have that. If you're new to this and someone's coming in and they're demanding that, you just need to understand what it is that they're going to get from it. Mm-hmm. I don't have a problem with things like double dipping and stuff. I just think you just need to be aware of it in the way that it operates, and it's pretty good. Here's some other news. Zscaler Oh, I added an S. I'm sorry. Zscaler files their IPO. They did a confidential IPO. There's this. I didn't dig deeper into it, but I think we saw this recently. I think it was Forescout did it the same way. You can basically be quiet. Like you can speed the whole thing up. You stay confidential with it. You're flying under the radar. You pop up. Naturally, they did not comment on it. They didn't have one. Zscaler is considered a unicorn. Their valuation currently is over $1 billion, and the rumor is they'll IPO by year end. It's interesting. I mean, we're seeing a lot happen with them. I mean, enterprise, we talked about them this week, and the partnerships and the way they're helping people move into the cloud faster.
Well, it's cloud.
Yeah.
It's,
I mean, it's
and we see it with Skybox too. There's a lot of money going into still today. I think the cloud security companies, cloud IT companies are really getting a lot of funding today. Like it's really picked up big. Like it's matured into like, oh well, yeah, of course we're gonna have a lot of players and they need to be well funded.
Well, yeah, and I think the thing too is that then if you want to be a player, you have to be well funded, right? Like we're gonna have a lot of players and they're gonna be well funded. And now to play, you've got to be well funded. So we're gonna watch those rounds go
in
up.
that space. I think you're correct. Not all spaces in security.
Correct, but cloud.
That space.
The way, and when we bring up the stuff looking at SaaS and looking at SaaS models and everything else, there's enough change. Let's pounce in, since you talked about Skybox. They took on $150 million in equity. So they're at $286.2 million, 10 rounds. They've been around since 2002. I didn't realize that they've been around that long.
I didn't realize they were around that long.
So that's kind of surprising to me. Typically, if you see this big of a round in equity, it means they're getting ready for an IPO. Like that's one of the signals.
Equity's just a loan, right?
It can be. It's typically.
Yeah.
But that's usually what that means.
So they don't have ownership or shares in the company. They're just loaning them the money.
Yep. Usually. Yeah. Usually that's what that means.
You say usually. Sometimes.
There's times
when equity comes with. We're going to loan you the money, and until you pay us back, we're going to take a percentage.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right?
Here's your guarantee, or here's your whatever else. But what you tend to see in a lot of situations like this is, and you know what? I didn't pull up offhand what their estimated revenues are, but this is $150 million is a lot of money, but because it didn't change the valuation and because it doesn't change the shares or the allocations, that's a pretty large chunk of change, and that's usually signaling that they're getting ready to go through all the hassle of an IPO.
I gotcha.
And they're large enough that that's kind of what I'd like to see. Crowdstrike, I'm just putting this in quick because it came across the news flashes for us. Crowdstrike raised $25 million in Series D. Now, if you're paying attention, Crowdstrike is one of those companies that we call a unicorn, which means they're over $1 billion in valuation. And we've got
also we call them the three C's in endpoint now.
I'm starting to notice that, right?
You see that trend where it's Cylance, CrowdStrike, and Carbon Black.
Yep.
Are the 3 C's.
And what I think's interesting about that too is that when Cylance came out, I wouldn't have called them an endpoint company. And when CrowdStrike came out, I was really confused.
They weren't an endpoint company.
I thought they were a threat intel company.
I don't think either one was an endpoint company when they were started.
But they are now.
Yeah.
And I think then when
the Carbon Black might have been the only one, but the Bit9 acquisition,
and that helped them.
Right.
So when you go back and we look at Play Bigger and we look at defining your category, I mean, I think this is actually a case where the category kind of got defined, but these are the kings. These people duking it out for the king, right? The kingship is
I
at stake.
agree that there is no clear. It's a weird category in that it doesn't play by any of the rules that we pretend to talk about.
And if you think about it too, and this is where I think the people who do category design have a real advantage. What are we talking about? Endpoint, okay, that's confusing by itself. Detection and response, I know we always put them together, but they're different. And then as you and I have been talking about, well, there's a whole analysis component to that as well. Therefore, you're going to have, I mean, that's not a single problem. You've got a very compound, multivariate problem, and that gets kind of nutty. So here's the thing. They raised $25 million in Series D. If you go back, you look at it, it basically means that they either kept the round open or they reopened it. So their last raise was in May. It was $100 million. That's what catapulted them to that unicorn status. So when you see something like this, all this means typically, and I didn't reach out to anybody on this one, what it typically means is either somebody was late or somebody really wanted to get in, and so they either kept the round open or they reopened the same round, which means they don't mess with the dilution, they don't mess with the valuation. It's just they're taking in more money. And since it's, I mean, I hate to say $25 million is a small round, but for a company valued at $1 billion, this feels more like.
Well, that changes their valuation if they got more money, potentially. Well,
it could.
On paper, it might.
But this amount, this really feels like somebody wanted a board seat or somebody wanted in or something like that. So it's just it feels like the continuation of the D round.
Really quick though,
it's not
and
a big deal.
We've talked to companies, several that have done this. Don't look at it as, well, there's already category king, I can't play. What Michael and I've seen even this week is you take like a component from one category and a component from another category, and you kind of blend them together. And now you get your own category that's kind of like a dotted line to these other categories, but I think that's really smart. I like seeing that a lot.
This was an exciting week. We got a chance to talk to a couple companies where we challenged them on stuff, and we went in thinking what we thought about them and put that right on the table with them. And that's one of the things I like about working with you is that this is what we think.
It is what it is, right.
And in both cases, they're like, yeah, except for we do it this way. And we were like, oh, keep going, keep talking to it. And so, it's I would never be disillusioned because somebody else is doing it. If your point of view on the problem is different, your approach is different, you got some hurdles to cross. But, I mean, frankly, that's some of what we try to help people with. So
I almost wish, too, the two calls that we had are the ones, we're talking about, and the companies were awesome. Yeah. I almost wish we had another couple mixed in there where we didn't think they were so awesome, so we could talk about what they would do better, right? Yeah. Like, because we had these companies, they're like, nope, like, they get it. But we didn't get to talk about, like, well, that company, we think they totally had it wrong, and here's what Michael and Paul think, they should do better. We might have that conversation with the vendor in a very delicate manner on the phone. Or we may come back afterwards and say, okay, if someone approaches it this way, like, why isn't that correct, and what can we do to improve their positioning and strengthen their category? Yeah,
I like it. Two more quick ones. MetricStream raised $65 million in equity. It's funny. They've been around since 2006. They've raised over $250 million. The revenue consensus is $40 million. It's not small. I'm familiar with the name. I have never come across MetricStream in the enterprise.
No, I haven't either.
Like, everybody's using Archer, and we're still calling it Archer, but everybody's got it. But they're there. And GRC, it's still making a play. I mean, that's where we can pull Matt in. Matt's got some chops there. Last piece, Proofpoint acquired CloudMark. Not terribly surprising, by the way. $110 million. So CloudMark had raised $38.5 million, but their rounds were between 2003 and 2010. So what that tells me is they hadn't IPO'd. They hadn't figured out how to acquire CloudMark. Now, was CloudMark, am I wrong on this? Were they part of the Verizon business thing for a while?
I'm getting CloudMark. There's a lot of cloud.
Yeah, I was going to say, I might be confused on that part. And if I am, I'm terribly sorry with that. But their revenue consensus was about $20 million. So a sale of 110.
Logged into Owler. What is Cloud? Read me the tag on CloudMark. In Owler, what do they do?
I'm going to pull it up.
What did they do before they're now Proofpoint?
Pull it up right now. They still do the same thing. This is a consolidation. Email
something. This was. It looks like to improve their.
Oh goodness! I just got the same flag you got.
Yeah, like we're not logged in.
Okay. Well, we're going to take a look at that. They do some sort of send a reputation thing based on email.
Okay. Gotcha. Which a lot of organizations I talk to are, in fact, using Proofpoint for email phishing protection.
Yeah. Proofpoint really distinguished themselves on that front. So
I'm not sure how well or not so well Proofpoint actually works, but they're in the mix.
What I like about it is they gave us the numbers, $110 million, and when you go look at the investment and you go look at the revenue consensus, either way you slice it, it's not that home run return, but it's a sizable return. It's a good deal for people. So that's it. It's been a fun week. Getting to be here in studio. We're going to have to do it again.
This is the first Startup Security Weekly that Michael and I have both been in the same location in the studio.
And I got here before it snowed. It's cold, and I'm sorry for that because I feel like I brought the cold with me.
It is cold. That's okay.
It's chilly outside.
It's okay. We're from the Northeast. We'll figure it out. Yeah,
I'll survive. I'm going to get on a plane.
We know how to dress warm.
Get on a plane, go back home. But this is great. It was a fun week. I like the way, too, that these things are evolving. So, we always say if you've got feedback on the way that we're doing stuff, especially as we look toward that business side of it, we're still going to look at what it takes for the enterprise, but also the business of security and those types of things. So,
I think a new theme emerged in the business of security kind of as a theme, because, we do talk about startups, and that's a huge part of the business of security is startups. So we realize we talk about so much more. And I think people have this perception that this is just a show about startups, and those that thank you took the time to listen, right?
We appreciate it.
We're like, wow, I learned so much about the business of security that we're like, that's Probably.
Yeah, we've gotten some really nice feedback, and I think that was part of our conversation this morning. And, you know, Paul, we always tell everybody, like, we don't get time to sit and talk. It's been a great week. We've had time to sit and talk and hang out. And
hey, it's a great time to be in security from a lot of different business aspects. In fact, you know, kind of an update on my journey is got a call from one of my business partners, and they're like, how do we handle, like, you know, like revenue sharing and all this stuff? And I'm like, I got this. I'm like, what do you think about this? And I'm like, you know, we pay the person in the revenue for the first part of it, and then we give them a residual after that. So basically, they get the first. And he was like, "Oh, wow, that was like you were like right on point." I'm
there
like,
you go.
I was like, I fell off my own chair. I'm like, "Oh wow, like I learned something and I applied it. Yay!" It was great. It was great.
No, you know, I mean, I've said over the course of the last year and a half, it's done the same thing for me. I think I said on one of the last shows, I mean, now that I've narrowed down my focus, in fact, you and I had this conversation this morning. So Paul and I don't know how many whiteboards we went through, 4 or 5 different panels. We snapped pictures of it all. We tried to prioritize it. And we said, wow, we expanded everything we're doing, and yet it feels so much more streamlined and focused.
Leave the focus. And we've talked about focus a lot on this show. And let me have made the mistakes for you. And a lot of times with the whiteboard got off track. I'm like, no, like I've been down that road before, and I reeled the reins in on it, and I've refocused, and I know that that's dangerous territory. And I'm not saying you shouldn't expand your offering and you shouldn't pivot, but those are very calculated decisions. You can get away from your mission, especially in security, where you can say, oh, we can do all these things, right? It's very easy to fall into that trap if you're starting a project, if you're starting a business in security, very easy to fall into that trap.
Yep.
But having that focus and expanding inside of your own focus is some of the things we're able to do, you know, today for our Security Weekly offerings, which is I'm excited about.
Me too.
But lesson learned from other people. Make sure you do the same thing.
Well, and I think our own mistakes too, right? And that's the thing that we talk about a lot. So we're going to look to keep doing that and doing that better. And I know a lot of you that have written to us and shared with us how this has helped you with your leadership and this has helped you grow your program. Awesome, and thank you. And we're going to keep looking to build that out as we go.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching Startup Security Weekly. We will see you next time.